Welcome, everybody, to Masterclass again here at A Mind for All Seasons. And today I'm excited to talk about the staffing crisis that healthcare professionals are up against. And I think there are also some insights that can be helpful for anyone because part of solving the staffing crisis involves what we do with people and how we support people around us and interact with them effectively. So, regardless of what brings you here today or what has you watching this on the replay, I hope that you'll find something here that makes a difference for you and for the people that you're interacting with. Well, I remember the first time that I got a phone call in the middle of the night. Well, it wasn't actually in the middle of the night. I had just gone to bed. It was probably 10:30, 10:45 at night. I had just become a newly minted executive director of a senior living community, and we had a concierge that worked throughout the night in that community. She called in distress. Actually, the evening concierge is who called. And her distress was because the night person had not shown up. She was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock, and she'd been frantically trying to call her and couldn't get through at all. And she couldn't stay. She had other things to get to the next morning. She needed to get a night's sleep, and she was in distress because she didn't have any other options or backup, except for me. I was the guy. That was the first time I had to get right back out of bed, put my clothes back on, drive across town, and work all night. And I had meetings the next morning. I wasn't able to leave until about 3 o'clock the following afternoon. And if you've ever worked through the night after a full day's work and then worked most of the next day, it kind of ruins you for a few days. That was when I really developed an appreciation for how important really good, reliable staff members are. Everybody in healthcare has also been through the common experience of getting that phone call at 5 o'clock on a Friday when you swore to your family members that you were going to get home, you were going to be there for them, you were going to start the weekend a little bit early because you'd had such a busy week. And yet the phone rings at 5 o'clock, and maybe it's the staffing coordinator saying, "I'm sorry, but we're shorthanded. And I've been calling agencies, I've been trying to get help to come in, and I don't know how we're going to cover the shift tonight." And you end up working because there is nobody else to cover it. And you feel again like you're letting your family down. Even though, at least in my case, in the case of many people that I talk to, those family members are quite supportive. They know that this goes with the job and somebody has to take care of people. Right now, if you do an AI-driven search, like this one from ChatGPT, and you ask what are the biggest concerns that healthcare owners and operators run into, you find that workforce availability and cost is still the number one concern. And you find a lot of phrases that show up in searches as well. People are looking for answers to the staffing crisis, or they're searching out recruiting and retention, or other kinds of phrases that you see on this list. So let's do something that healthcare professionals already should know about, a root cause analysis. Let's go back and look at what's driving all of this. If we're going to figure out why good people leave, we also have to figure out why good people come in the first place. What would bring someone who's really solid into a healthcare profession? I think that the number one reason that really good people come is that they want to make a difference for other people. There's satisfaction in doing that. There's a certain joy that comes when you have given of yourself to make a difference in another person's life. And consider the fact that many people will do things at their own expense in order to make a difference in someone else's life. People volunteer their time and energy all the time throughout the world just for the privilege of making a difference in someone else's life. People even do healthcare related things out of the goodness of their heart because they want to make a difference in someone else's life. Think of all of the nurses and other healthcare professionals that go on medical mission trips. They go to third world countries and work with dentists to repair cleft palates, or they educate people about menstrual health in third world countries where girls otherwise would be sitting on bales of hay and not able to go to school because no one has taught them how to handle their period. There are all kinds of things related to health that people will do at their own expense. Doctors will even engage in things like Doctors Without Borders and other initiatives so that they can go and make a difference in areas that would otherwise be underserved or completely unserved. If healthcare professionals will frequently go out at their own expense, then we need to confront the fact that when it comes to paying people to do healthcare jobs, maybe the reason that we have a staffing crisis isn't just because of pay. Maybe there's more to it. I think that the very fact that people will go out and sometimes spend months or even years at their own expense serving other people is a reminder that we need to do more to create an opportunity that attracts really good people. If young people are willing to go out and delay college so that they can do things to be of service to others, whether it's a religious mission trip or they're going on a medical mission or some other opportunity to serve, then maybe that's a hint that we haven't done a really good job as a healthcare profession convincing people that there are really exciting opportunities to experience the joy of serving other people and they're right in your own backyard, and we'll even pay you for it. Consider that Dr. Patch Adams, who is actually a little bit more flamboyant than even the Robin Williams character played in the movie Patch Adams, has attracted healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, CNAs, others who want to be involved in making a difference for people for many years. He's pulled people together to go on mission trips where they dress up as clowns and they go bring joy to people. He's worked hard to try to create a clinic where people can come free of charge and receive care. That's a different approach. It's a visionary one that has inspired a lot of people. So, the bottom line, if we're doing our root cause analysis, is that people serve others, sometimes at their own expense, because knowing that you made a difference in someone's life brings joy. And joy is addictive. We want as much of it as we can get. So, if we continue the root cause analysis, we might ask, why do good people burn out? Well, the term burnout was coined in the 1970s by Dr. Herbert Freudenberger in his book Burnout, The High Cost of High Achievement. And he described burnout as the extinction of motivation or incentive, especially where one's devotion to a cause or relationship fails to produce the desired results. Now, extinction is a pretty strong word. He's not saying that things just sort of drift a little bit. Extinction means it is gone. And notice the key that it happens when you're giving your heart and soul to a cause, but you're not getting anything back, or at least you're not getting the results that you were expecting. This suggests that people don't burn out from hard work. They burn out from futile work, work where they feel like they've fallen on the sword day after day. They've given themselves to a cause, and it just doesn't seem to matter. One of the things that I observed for years while running a memory care community is that sometimes our very best people with the biggest hearts were just completely knocked down every time a resident would pass away. It's very difficult to give your heart to someone and then have it crushed over and over because you lose that person. It's not easy to say goodbye to people who are passing from life over and over and over. And I think the COVID pandemic exacerbated that for a lot of healthcare professionals because people came in, they worked really hard, they made lots of sacrifices, they left their families at home, and they went out into the unknown to face things, and people were dying right and left. For a long time in healthcare, especially when it comes to things like assisted living and skilled nursing, when people move into a community, it's because they have to. Nobody wakes up and says, I hope today is the day that I get to move into such and such skilled nursing facility. They move because they're on a downward slope and things get so bad that they need assistance. So when people move in, historically, all that healthcare has done is to look at what someone needs assistance with as far as their activities of daily living, what their medications or supplements are, what their dietary orders are. We put a care plan in place and we sort of manage the decline. And the most difficult things that healthcare professionals deal with are after that point of admission because things just keep getting worse and worse, which basically guarantees that our very best staff with the biggest hearts are going to work hard, but people are going to continue declining. What if it didn't have to be that way? Now, there are other causes of workplace burnout that Dr. Freudenberger points out, and I think that these things tie in overall. A lot of people burn out because they just feel like they don't have enough time in the day, and there's this unreasonable time pressure. Or they feel like they don't have good support from a manager, or they're not clear on what it is that they're supposed to be accomplishing from day to day. If people don't know what success looks like, they're way more likely to burn out because they're aiming at a moving target, and it's difficult to feel secure and to feel like what you're doing matters if you don't even know how to measure success. So when the pressure's on in the healthcare workplace, those of us in a position of leadership need to learn to stay cool. And those of you who've been coming to Masterclasses for a long time know that I love acronyms. They make it easier to remember things. And cool reminds us that we need to connect with others in ways that help them feel truly supported and inspired by what we're doing. And we need to operationalize it. It can't be just a one-off thing. It needs to be baked into the culture and how the organization operates. We need to optimize all of that and find those little tweaks that actually make the biggest difference. And all of that really contributes to what it is to actually lead. There's a big difference between leading and managing, and both roles are important. But organizations that don't have as much trouble with the staffing crisis are those with real leaders who are truly visionary and paint the picture of a brighter tomorrow. Now, when it comes to connecting with people and operationalizing things and optimizing it, it is far easier to prepare and prevent than it is to repair and repent. That's true of a lot of things in life. But when it comes to human relationships, this is certainly true. It's true in our own families. It's a lot easier to nurture our relationships in a marriage or in a relationship with our children than to come to the point that someone is ready to exit the relationship, like filing for divorce, and then trying to pull the pieces together. And in the workplace, when people are giving notice, they're basically saying, I want a divorce from this organization. Well, let's not wait till it gets to that point. I love how Simon Sinek put it. He said, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. So let's talk through a few principles about how to do that. And then let's talk about what the future of healthcare might look like and some examples of what I've seen in organizations that really have turned around a staffing crisis. And staffing is one of their greatest strengths. There are basically three things that I want to point out that are key in how we take care of team members around us, regardless of the organization that we're in. We have to take care of each other. We have to focus on the mission, and we really need to remove roadblocks and inefficiencies. So let's consider first how we take care of each other. One of the first things that we need to do if people are going to be fired up and intrinsically motivated is to create an inspiring culture. I love how Professor Hugh Nibley once put it. He said, true leaders are inspiring because they are inspired. They're caught up in a higher purpose, devoid of personal ambition, and they're idealistic and incorruptible. In other words, if people aren't behaving in inspired ways, the place to look is in the mirror. What are we doing to be inspired? Because if we're really caught up in a higher purpose, if we're fired up about the future and what we can create, and we're communicating that effectively with others, it is inspiring to them. And people want to be around inspiring leaders. One of the ways that we can help people feel that they're seen and heard and acknowledged, and that they have trust for their leader, is a simple technique that I've shared with many people all over the country called Pennies in the Pocket. When I got a communication degree, I learned that humans need about 5 positive interactions for every one interaction that's perceived as negative in order for them to feel like the relationship is on solid ground. Most of us think that we do a pretty good job giving others praise. But a lot of people, when surveyed, feel like they don't get a lot of praise in their life. And this is especially true in the workplace. Most managers who are surveyed say they do a good job of acknowledging the people that they're serving. And most frontline staff say they get very little acknowledgement. And I think this comes back to the need for a 5-to-1 ratio. We can't possibly do enough to acknowledge the people on the front lines and to help them recognize that they're seen and heard and appreciated. And what you appreciate appreciates. It goes up in value. So here's how pennies in the pocket works and gives us a very simple way of managing the 5-to-1 ratio. You put 5 pennies in your left pocket in the morning. Your goal is to move all 5 pennies to the right pocket by the end of the day. The way that you get to move a penny is by giving someone meaningful, deserved, very specific praise. I'm not talking about an attaboy. I'm not talking about saying, good job. I'm talking about pointing out exactly what somebody did that made a difference. When you walk up to a team member and you say, I was watching the way that you interacted with that family. They came in really upset. Something wasn't going well. And you met them where they were. You validated what they were going through. You didn't get defensive. And I watched how you masterfully helped them feel heard and seen. And then you turned things around and you started offering real solutions. You took ownership of the problem. You made it happen. That family was thrilled with the way that you handled it. They went from complaining to being really good fans of not only you, but what our whole organization is doing. When you approach someone on the front lines with that kind of deserved specific praise, it means the world to them. They can live off that for quite a while. So when you give someone praise like that, then you move a penny to the right pocket. And those pennies are there simply to bang against your leg all day long and remind you of the need to look for what's going right and to give meaningful, deserved, specific praise. You can even do this in other aspects of life. You could be at the grocery store, and when you see someone handling things really well, or they're especially helpful to you, and you take time to compliment them on that in a sincere way, then move a penny to the other pocket. And if you get through all 5 pennies by lunch, then rinse and repeat. We can't possibly do this enough. And I promise, if you're looking for what's going right in life, it makes a huge difference, not only in others' lives, but in how you feel. One of the other things that we can do to make a difference and to serve the team and to take care of them is to improve the educational level of the team. I had an experience many years ago when I was working as an administrator that made me rethink what we were doing to train our staff. I learned about this man. I don't know if you recognize him, but his name is Howard Schultz. And if you haven't heard of Howard Schultz, you know his company, Starbucks. When Howard Schultz took over Starbucks, which was a small, kind of struggling Seattle coffee company, he had a vision of turning it into a much larger enterprise. I'm not sure if he saw the global enterprise that it's become, but he knew that it could grow. And he wanted to do that by making Starbucks not a coffee company, but a people company. And he said on multiple occasions that he wanted Starbucks to be the number 3 place that you would go to. Now, 3rd place doesn't sound so good until you consider that the number 1 place that most of us choose to be is in our own homes. The 2nd place that most of us choose to be is at work. He wanted number 3 on the list to be a Starbucks. If you're not at your house and you're not at your job, I want you to be at a Starbucks. Well, he recognized that in order to create a human experience that was so good that people would want to hang out at a Starbucks, it took a lot of training. He made sure that you could get college credit for some of the training that baristas received. And when I found out that under Howard Schultz's term, that Starbucks baristas would have at least 72 hours of training in year 1 alone, it floored me. I thought, if it takes 72 hours to train a barista how to pour an expensive cup of coffee and keep people coming back again and again and again, then where on earth is the line that you would have to draw or the standard that you'd have to follow if you're training a healthcare professional working on the front lines how to go in the room of someone who's living with advanced Alzheimer's disease, has no idea where they are, what's going on, and you've got to, in a matter of minutes, make a connection with that person and get them into the bathroom to assist with toileting or to help them get into the shower. I have no idea where the bar is for that kind of interpersonal interaction, but if it takes 72 hours in year 1 for a barista to learn how to pour a cup of coffee and interact with the customers, then we can't possibly be doing enough to train the frontline staff. Now, once I realized this, one of the things that I started doing is to try to create a culture of education. I or the nurse that I was working with in the memory care community I was running would go to shift change, and we would take 5 minutes to teach one principle, just one thing that we were going to pay attention to in that day's work. We would explain why it was important. We might do a little role play, and we would encourage people to get out and focus on that one thing. It could be as simple as, let's talk about why it's important to get at or below eye level of the person that you're serving as quickly as possible, so that they feel a sense of being in charge instead of having this person hovering over them. It doesn't take long to teach a principle like that. And if staff get out and they practice it every day, all shift long, and then they come back at shift change and they report what they observed and what went well and what didn't go well, then we're creating a culture of education. Related to this idea of training people is not just teaching them what to do. It's not just trying to give that one principle and then practice it with them and have them go out and put it into practice. It's also leveraging our number one training tool, which is to lead by example. The picture here is of Usain Bolt, and he's winning a world record. The other two runners in this race also broke the world record. And when they were interviewed later, they said, "Did you know that you were on pace to beat the world record?" And they said, "No, we were just trying to catch Usain." What this example illustrates is that humans learn by mimicking, and they don't go as fast as they can go. Humans go as fast as the leader goes. But too many leaders are not out nurturing their team. It's very easy, especially in healthcare, to stay in the office and fill out paperwork because a lot of the regulations that we're held to, a lot of the standards that survey teams and others would expect us to follow require a lot of paperwork. But everything that really helps the team rise to the occasion is when the leader gets out of the office and is demonstrating things and interacting in ways that inspire others. So to create a culture of education, we have to both teach by what we say and how we train, and we have to get out there. We have to be demonstrating consistently. If the leader is getting at or below eye level of the people that they're serving, things are much more likely to go that way for the entire rest of the team, because humans learn by mimicking. So a lot of you may know that when I started A Mind for All Seasons, one of the things that I decided to do was to try to take this concept of teaching one idea every day for healthcare professionals or family caregivers, and to create a little daily video about that, to make it easy for people to get some education. That's where the Caregiver Minute came from. And if you're not already signed up for the Caregiver Minute and you want to get a free daily video that's 3 to 7 minutes long and it just teaches one thing, you can join thousands of other people around the country who watch that and share it with their teams. I recently had one of our members here at Mind for All Seasons, who's a healthcare professional, say that it's the most important thing that she has done to help train her team. Because the team members know it's going to be brief, they're going to get a really good nugget, and it's going to be something that they can either learn from personally or immediately put into practice with the people that they serve. And if you like QR codes, this will take you straight to the site if you're not already signed up. That might be an easier way. Okay, so we talked about taking care of each other. Let's talk about focusing on the mission and what that looks like. There are three things that people really want when it comes to others that they're looking to for leadership and what gives them a sense of security. Humans want clarity, they want simplicity, and they want certainty. And there are a lot of experiences in life where we're lacking most or all of those things. Think about the COVID pandemic. There was no clarity, and things certainly weren't simple, and there was no certainty. You'd get to work, and you'd have new edicts from the local health department, and you'd meet as a team, and you'd try to figure out how you're going to put them into practice. And then by 10 o'clock in the morning, you got an update from the health agency. And then by 2 o'clock, you'd already had a couple more updates, and it felt like things were just constantly a moving target. And even though there was some idea of certainty at first that, oh, if we can just create a vaccine that might help people not develop COVID, that we can get on top of this. Well, that really didn't work. And it really threw a lot of people for a loop. There are many situations that are similar to that where people are lacking in these three things. If we want to help the team, though, and focus on the mission, we need to realize that if you go out and read as many books as you can find on leadership, you will find that all great leaders basically do one thing. Great leaders paint a picture of a brighter tomorrow. They help people believe that the future looks different, and they don't have all the answers as to how to get there, but they paint a compelling vision about what that future looks like, and they invite other people to work toward that future. People will do amazing things, even under high, intense pressure, when they have a sense of vision and they're fighting for the right cause. The picture that you see on the current slide is from the Finnish Winter War. This was during the World War II era. Russia invaded Finland. And you're seeing a picture of Finnish soldiers that were bedded down in the snow. And sometimes they were there for days or weeks on end, waiting for the right moment to fight back against the Russian invaders. When you consider some of the statistics from this war, they're remarkable things and great lessons to learn. Finland had somewhere between 300 and 340,000 soldiers, and the Russians had somewhere between 425,000 and 760,000. Consider that Finland had 32 tanks. We don't know how many tanks Russia had, but it was between 2,500 and 6,500 tanks. There were 114 aircraft that were way outmatched by 3,880 aircraft. And yet, at the end of everything, there were 70,000 total casualties on the Finnish side, and somewhere between 321,000 and 381,000 total casualties for the Russians. The Finns beat back the Russians, and they did it because they were fighting for a very different cause. They believed in a brighter tomorrow. They were fighting for their homes and their freedom and their families. And the Russian soldiers were fighting because they'd been conscripted and their government leaders told them, well, you have to go to war. They had very different motivations. This isn't unlike the Revolutionary War right here in our own country. When you look at the statistics and what the colonists were up against when it came to fighting Great Britain, the world's most powerful army at the time, those colonists never should have won the Revolutionary War. But they were fighting for a higher cause. And they prevailed ultimately because they had grit. They had something that the Finns understood. The Finns call it sisu, and there is no English equivalent for sisu. Sisu is a word that is sort of this combination of daring and strength and persistence and grit, and it only comes out when you're up against the wall. It's only possible to have sisu if you're in a practically impossible situation and you persevere anyway. If times are good, you can't have sisu. So I don't know exactly how to explain it in English, but that's as close as I can get. And if you meet someone from Finland and you talk about sisu, they know exactly what it is. Sisu is what those Finnish soldiers had when they were lying down in the snow, waiting for the right moment to fight for their lives and their freedom. We can help people have that kind of grit and determination if they know what they're fighting for and if they believe in the cause. Part of what we need to do to help healthcare professionals believe in the right cause is to avoid what I call departmentalized thinking. Departmentalized thinking is so common, and it's what happens when people start thinking that their job is a list of tasks and it falls within a specific department. So, for example, if you're walking down the hall as a nurse and you see a little trash off to the side, you have a choice. You can look at it and say, well, all of us deserve to live in a clean environment. I better pick that up. Or you can say, wow, housekeeping's falling down on the job. And that is departmentalized thinking. As soon as we start thinking that something is someone else's job, we're falling into this trap. It's common for nurses and CNAs and others that are involved in managing medication or other traditionally healthcare related things. Will think that meaningful activity for people they're serving, oh, that's the activity department's job. I would argue that all of us in healthcare have one job description. So here it is. In fact, if I had my way, I would scrap all the job descriptions that are out there on the planet for healthcare professionals, and I would replace all those descriptions with this statement. My responsibility is to create opportunities for those I serve to continue having a meaningful life. Period. That's what we're all doing. And we help people have a meaningful life by meeting 5 key needs. People have spiritual needs, they have physical needs, they have intellectual needs, cultural needs, and emotional needs. And when one of those areas isn't going very well, life is not as good as it could be. It's everyone's responsibility to help meet those needs for the people that we serve and for everyone on the team. And that means that we have to focus on people instead of tasks. Many of you have heard me talk about the task trap, which is what happens when we skip over the first and most important step in every human interaction. The first step when we interact with another is to make a meaningful connection with them. You would never open the front door to your house, see a complete stranger, and just say, "Oh, well, come on in." You would expect to build some trust. We let friends and family assist us with all kinds of things. We don't tend to let complete strangers help us unless we take time to build a little bit of a relationship with them. So we need to treat others as people, not as objects. We need to connect with them, and we need to help meet their spiritual, physical, intellectual, cultural, and emotional needs. So once we're taking care of each other and we're focusing on the mission, there still can be situations where we're short-staffed through no one's fault other than maybe we got a bunch of people that are out sick, or maybe some other crisis has come up. When we're up against the wall, it's so important to remove roadblocks and inefficiencies and to really work well together. I have seen healthcare professionals who literally can do the job of 3 or 4 people because they're so good at what they do and they're so efficient. We've all seen experiences in the athletic world where teams crumble. Maybe a basketball team has a really good regular season and they get to the playoffs and they choke in the first game. Or they get through a couple of games and then they're up against a different kind of opponent than they ever faced in the regular season, and they just fall apart as if they don't even remember how to play the game. People who normally would make all kinds of free throws and three-point shots stop making those shots. Why does that happen? I think part of it is because people let anxiety and stress distract them from the fundamentals. Some of you may recognize the golfer in this picture. Greg Norman had an epic meltdown at the 1996 Masters tournament. He went in with a 6-stroke lead ahead of Nick Faldo going into the final round of the Masters tournament. And he stayed up Saturday night pacing around his hotel room, really worrying about how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but he got so worked up about the opportunity that he had to win the Masters tournament and how far ahead he was that he not only lost his lead, but he also added another 5 strokes to it. He lost by 11 strokes. It was one of the most epic meltdowns in sports history. And that kind of meltdown isn't isolated to golf. It happens across the board. Professionals who have trained muscle memory for years and years quit leveraging that muscle memory in the heat of the moment. They allow stress and anxiety to distract them from the fundamentals. And the same thing happens in the workplace. When the pressure's on, we melt down if we're not really careful. So let's review a few fundamental things that can help us be more efficient. First of all, people think that you can manage time. And let's break that myth once and for all. The only thing that we need to know about time, really, when it comes down to it, is that we all have the same 24 hours in a day. How we use it matters. Some people get very little done in a 24-hour period, or very little that actually moves an organization or a project forward. Other people run many different companies. It's amazing to see what people can do with the same 24 hours in the day. One of the reasons that some people get so much done and others don't get as much done is that it's very easy as humans to confuse being busy with being productive. I love this little cartoon because you see an obvious example of being very busy, working really, really hard, dragging that sled with square wheels. And it would be so easy to stop and put round wheels on it. And yet, if you think, no, we're working hard, we got to keep moving forward, you're likely to just keep exerting yourself and getting nowhere. Another way of putting it is treading water is just as physically demanding as swimming, but only one will move you toward a goal. So, are you doing things that are actually productive, or are you just staying busy? So, the antidote is not to try to do more. It's actually to do more of the right things. It's to get clear on what you should say no to instead of what to say yes to. Success in life and in business has a lot less to do with just trying to cram more in. It actually has more to do with getting super clear on what you say no to. That's why Steve Jobs said that people think focus is saying yes to the thing you got to focus on, but it really means saying no to the 100 other good ideas there are. You have to get good at saying no if you're going to truly make a difference. I've shared with a few of you the box and shelf method, but if you're not familiar with it, let's review it. Years ago, I used to do some executive coaching for healthcare professionals. And sometimes I would go in their office and there would be papers everywhere and all kinds of projects. And you might think of it as a lot of open loops in the mind. And I shared with people something that I had learned from Darren Hardy. I went to a business masterclass a couple of times with him, invested a lot of money to go and learn some of these kinds of techniques. And this was one of the most impactful things that I learned from Darren Hardy. So I started using it with these executives that I was coaching. When I went to an office and somebody's office looks like a bomb went off, or even if you didn't see all the stuff out, but they had a lot of open loops in their mind because there were so many projects they had to deal with, here's exactly what we would do. We'd get some boxes and some file folders, and we would just go through the desk and pick up a piece of paper or whatever was sitting there. And we'd ask, is this something that could be done in the next 1 to 3 minutes? And if it was, I just had the person do it right then and there, get it done, get it off their plate. If it took longer than that, then we considered it a project. And the next question was, could this be delegated to someone else? Is there someone on the team who really needs to grow by having the opportunity to do this? If that's the case, then you give them the project, you collect everything that's related to it, you go meet with the person right away, you invite them to do the thing. You explain why you have confidence that they're the person to do it. You make sure that they're clear on what the steps would look like to accomplish it. You answer any questions that they might have. And then this is really key. You schedule time to follow up with them. If you have a time on your calendar for, let's say, a week from the day that you're delegating at 3 o'clock, and you know that that's when you're going to meet with that person to follow up and see how things are going, then you don't have to keep worrying about that thing. And it's getting it out of your head that makes the biggest difference. Now, when you pick up something from the desk or from your project list that truly cannot be delegated, let's suppose it's something that you absolutely have to do, then here's the next step. You take the box or the file folder, depending on how much stuff is related to that project, and you go around the desk or your digital files and you collect everything related to that project in one spot. You put it all in one file folder or one box or one digital folder. And then you ask yourself, how long do I think it will take to do this project? Let's suppose it's a 10-hour project by your estimation. Well, you better plan on 13 because humans are not very good at estimating. So give yourself an extra 30%. And if you don't need it, great, that's extra time. But then you have to ask yourself, when does that project need to be completed? And if the answer is a month from now, and you have a 13-hour project, then very simply, you have to go through your calendar and block out 13 one-hour blocks. You put the box or the file folder away, and you only think about it when it comes up on your calendar in one of those 13-hour-long spots. And when it comes up, you close your door, you put up a sign that says, I'm doing deep work and I can't be bothered for the next hour. And then you get busy. You turn off all your alerts and you go head down and you work really hard on that one project for 1 hour. When the timer goes off, you're done. You box things up, you put it back on the shelf, and you walk away from it until the next time it shows up on your calendar. Now, if an emergency comes up and you absolutely have to reschedule, then the key is you better find another time for that hour block or it's just going to be gone. and you won't be prepared at the time that the project is to be completed. If you follow this method, you will get a lot more done, and it will feel more effortless because your mind won't be constantly churning on the projects that you need to accomplish. It's also important to create a high performance culture. And if we're going to understand how to do that, we need to understand a natural human tendency. If you're a parent and your child comes home and they have a report card that says reading A, social studies A, art A, math C minus, then where do you suppose most parents' attention goes? Of course, it goes to the C minus in math. And that's true across the world. But I think we need to confront the simple fact that a C minus is an average score. And that doesn't mean that it couldn't be improved. But when was the last time you watched an Olympic figure skater and asked yourself the question, I wonder how they did in algebra? Or I wonder what their math scores are like? It's probably never happened because intuitively as humans, we know that you don't become world class at one thing without being disproportionately focused on that one thing. It doesn't matter what the one thing is. If you're trying to be a world-class golfer, you have to say no to a lot of time spent on other things to focus on your golf game. And if the way that you change the world and impact others for good doesn't have anything to do with math, then more and more people are confronting the fact that although it's important to have good basic math skills, maybe you don't have to try to prove that you're a math genius if your real superpower is in painting or playing an instrument or engineering or something else. And I guess you might need the math if you're in engineering, but you get the idea. We have this unrealistic expectation that has sort of fused into our culture where people think that they have to be good at everything. Now, what on earth does this have to do with the workplace? People are used to this kind of treatment in school, and it trickles over into the workplace. Most job reviews spend about 90% of their time working with the employee on what they can do differently in the coming year to be better, identifying areas where they might be weak and looking for opportunities to improve. And only about 10% of the time talking about what's going really well. Let me give you an example of why that could get us into trouble. This is Lionel Messi. And if you're a soccer fan, you know Messi. He is arguably the greatest soccer player in the world, although I can hear some people screaming and saying, no, it's Ronaldo. Years ago, I saw a lecture from Marcus Buckingham, who has studied organizations and what makes them successful. He's led a lot of surveys across the world. And he shared this example of Lionel Messi, and I thought it was brilliant. So I wanted to pass it along to you. He pointed out that if you're a soccer scout and you get wind of this young man in an Argentine fishing village that shows real promise as a soccer player, you might go watch him play. And if you're a professional soccer scout, you would see two weaknesses that he has. Number one is that he's short for his age. He had a growth hormone deficiency, and his parents couldn't afford the $400 a month in growth hormone, so he was really short. And you might be able to get away with that in the Pee Wee leagues, but a professional soccer scout would recognize if you're playing pro soccer and you can't see as far down the field because you're short, that could be a problem. Soccer scouts would also recognize that he was very left foot dominant. He kicked the ball about 10 times with his left foot for every one with his right foot. Well, soccer scouts from FC Barcelona sat down with Lionel Messi and with his parents, and they said, we want to move you to Spain. We're going to pay for you to have growth hormone treatments, and we're going to pay for you to have the best coaching in the world so that you can get over that left foot dominance. Because in the professional leagues, if everyone knows that you're left foot dominant, they'll just try to box you in, and you might struggle. So they said, okay. They moved to Barcelona. They started working with the soccer team. And a while later, Lionel Messi announced that he was quitting the game. The coaches were shocked. They said, what's going on? And he said, it used to be fun, but it's not fun anymore. All I hear all day long is how left foot dominant I am and how much I need to fix that problem. And I've been taking growth hormone, but it hasn't helped. I'm still short. To their credit, the coaches said, you're right. Maybe we just have been going about this all wrong. We'll stop the growth hormone treatment. We're going to quit trying to coach you out of your left foot dominance. It actually hasn't slowed you down yet. You're still playing really well. So the only advice we have for you is wherever you are on the soccer field, just be dangerous. Be so good with that left foot that nobody can do anything about that. Well, this is what it looks like when you get out of someone's way and you start focusing on their superpower, their real strength, instead of trying to correct a perceived weakness. You'll see Lionel Messi at the bottom of the screen, and watch what happens in this match against Atletico Bilbao.
Makes it all the more remarkable that along with Barcelona and Real Madrid, Athletic Bilbao have never been relegated from the Primera Division.
It's something to be admired, I have to say. Well, there's three of them round. He's still going. Look at this, Kevin.
It's a brilliant run from Messi. Did he go all the way?
1, 2, round him. Kicks away from Rico. One more defender inside, bang. Oh, he's just unbelievable. How do you stop him? And you think three of them around him, he's not going to get past them all. He does. Then he takes on the fourth, comes inside and scores it at the near post. He's just incredible. I don't think we've ever seen or ever will see anything like Lionel Messi again.
So the question for any leader or any parent or any spouse is, what are the other people's left foot? What's your left foot? What is your unique superpower? If you can be aware of when someone is actually doing really well, and you call attention to that and you magnify that, that is when people will be intrinsically motivated. So a good leader is constantly on the lookout for when someone is using their left foot, when their superpower is showing up, instead of just looking for all the things that need to be corrected. Now, as we try to optimize the team and focus on fundamentals, it's also important to understand the difference between a resource problem and an allocation problem. Sometimes we think that we need more staff, but it's only because we're seeing things narrowly. Years ago, I was consulting at a critical access hospital and a co-located skilled nursing facility. And when I started consulting there, they had just gone through their federal survey, and they did pretty well. But the survey team gave them a deficiency because they didn't have enough staff members assisting people who needed help to eat during the lunchtime. And as we sat down with an interdisciplinary team, I asked, well, what do you think we could do to start solving this challenge? Now, by interdisciplinary team, we had nurses, we had CNAs, we had a housekeeping supervisor, we had the business office manager, and on and on. We had people from every part of the organization reviewing the survey together. And a housekeeper raised her hand, and she asked to the director of nursing, what would it take for me to be able to assist someone in the dining room to eat? Is that even allowed? And the nurse said, well, if we trained you and documented it and you demonstrated competency, you could do that. Why? The housekeeping supervisor said, well, my colleagues and I are downstairs at about lunchtime trying to clean the hospital. And since we're a critical access hospital, which means we're in a rural area and we don't have that many people consistently, often there's not that much to do. And we end up sitting around chit-chatting while the rest of you are upstairs trying to take care of real people and you are short-staffed. If you could train us, we could come upstairs at lunchtime and we could participate in helping. And that's when the light bulb went on for everybody, that even though they lived in a small town and it was going to be hard to bring on more staff, maybe they didn't need to. They just needed to use their existing staff in a much more effective way. So they didn't have a resource issue. They just weren't allocating it correctly. We can also be aware of what I call the vacation paradox. This is Parkinson's law, which says that work expands to fill the time given. I call it the vacation paradox because most of us have experienced that day before we go on vacation where you get 5 or 6 times more done in the workday than you do any other day. That happens to me too. And that's always a moment of shame because I realize I could be getting so much more done from day to day. Because when I'm up against the wall and I absolutely have to get it done so I can go out of town, somehow I find a way and I just crank it out and get it done. We all experience that, and it's a constant reminder, but that we could be doing more if we stayed really focused. Now, the last thing that I want to share with you is the simple idea that when it comes to the staffing crisis, a lot of people think that they need to recruit more and more staff. And we fail to consider that what if we didn't need more staff? We fail to consider that it's kind of like revenue versus expenses. If you're trying to improve your bottom line in business, you can either generate more revenue or you can cut expenses or some combination of the two. Imagine that the staff that you need or that you think you need is like revenue, but your expenses are how many staff are required to take care of people. Let me give you some examples of what managing this differently might look like. There was a company several years ago called Guardian Angel Homes, and they decided to build a therapy studio. And I worked with them to get some medical devices that improve oxygen delivery, that calm inflammation, that make sure that blood is flowing better, that are anti-inflammatory. And they created this therapy studio in several of their buildings. They wanted to help have better resident outcomes. Well, they had some amazing victories, like improving fall risk and reducing the likelihood that someone was going to fall by a lot, all by using a balance board that would measure fall risk and then have some interventions that people could use to try to get better at their balance. So, for example, this 105-year-old woman went from a high fall risk to a moderate risk. And this 78-year-old went from a moderate risk to a low risk, all in a few months of effort that was done as an activity in the community. This is a woman who started participating in the devices at the brain therapy studio. Prior to doing so, she was a Hoyer lift transfer, so she needed a machine to pick her in and out of bed. And she'd been a Hoyer lift transfer for 10 years. She was 100 years old. But just by using some medical devices that improved blood flow and calmed inflammation and helped stimulate better energy production, she was able to get up and start walking 75 feet with a one-person assist and a walker. And that allowed her to not need the Hoyer lift anymore. Well, that improved their staff ratio by a full person. It takes 2 people to operate a Hoyer lift safely. And if you only need 1, then you don't need to hire more staff. And that started me thinking, wow, if we really focus on helping residents do better and changing the healthcare trajectory, then that helps to solve the staffing crisis. Now, Guardian Angel Homes was so successful at what they were doing that a couple of veteran CNAs were inspired when they heard friends talking about it, and they lived on the opposite side of the country. They moved from the East Coast to the West Coast for the privilege of working at Guardian Angel Homes because they wanted to be part of something special, where instead of just managing decline, they were helping people do better. Some of you have heard me talk about Hal Cranmer. He's a member of our AmFast community. He owns some assisted living facilities in Arizona where he works really hard to help people improve. He changes the healthcare trajectory for them. And by shifting his focus on, instead of just managing decline, to helping people really improve, it has changed things for his staffing. He emailed me a list of how his staffing was looking in each of the 4 homes that he runs. And you'll notice that a lot of his staff have been with him 7 to 10 years. It's remarkable. And of some of the caregivers in his building, he's got people that have been there over 10 years. Some of the newer people came because of other family members who worked in the building. And some of those staff members have written letters to say how much they appreciate the chance to work in a place that's actively fighting to help residents get better. Remember that burnout happens when your devotion to the cause fails to produce the desired result. And Hal's staff are proof that people don't burn out as much when your efforts result in residents doing better. So I think part of the future of healthcare is creating organizations that are actively fighting hard to help people improve, and we're celebrating those victories. And as that happens, we see some pretty significant changes in retention and healthcare enthusiasm. If people will go out on mission trips and serve others, all for the joy of helping them improve, then I think we can do the same thing in a lot of other healthcare scenarios. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. We'll wrap up the kind of formal presentation here. Let's go to Q&A.